Normally our sales team uses these really cool looking branded slides, but since this isn't really a sales pitch, I got to choose whatever I wanted, and apparently I chose these really ominous looking, scary slides. In fact, I've actually never seen it presented on the screen before, and these colors are really terrible. It looks like we're doing some sort of R&D, some sort of Terminator thing. Like, what the hell is threat intelligence platform, and when it's going to kill us all?
Don't worry, we're here for the brain.
So before I dive in, I'll give you a high-level view of how this talk is structured. I'm going to go over some very basic stuff to help set the stage of what threat intelligence is. Kind of boring, but then I'll go into the really cool stuff at the end. So this is me. This is my picture. I don't know why I'm trying to picture myself, but I look like I'm attending my first junior prom. A little bit of my background. So 12 years working within the industry. I come from a software engineering background, and I've blended that with cybersecurity over the years. I've published a number of cybersecurity white papers before, and most of my experience comes within the defense industrial base. At my last gig, I was at the General Dynamics Security Operations Centers, overseeing 14 different business units. Located across the world, and there we're tracking mostly foreign nation-state operations, over 40 campaigns across 5 different countries. And currently at ThreatQ, we're a cybersecurity company developing a threat intelligence platform, which I'm here to talk to you about today. All right, so traditional security operations have largely revolved around a SIEM, or a security incident event manager. And we've been running this model for about 20 years now. ArcSight and QRadar are the largest players within this space, and managing those bad boys is just a really monstrous task. I'm sure most of you analysts here have sat behind a SIEM console at one point, and it sucks. It's incredibly boring. But as tactical operations have evolved over the years, SIEMs have been left behind, and they just aren't effective as we hoped them to be at one point. And analysts are just getting flooded with too much information in their day-to-day. And their day-to-day is just this boring, mundane, looking for a needle in a haystack. Even the NOPSEC guy said it. It's information overload. It's just way too much stuff going on. And most of these breaches aren't detected in a timely fashion simply because they're lost in a sea of junk security event data. And here's a quote I found talking about the real-world challenges of running the SIEM model. SIEMs provide the framework for analyzing data, but they don't provide the intelligence to analyze that data sensibly and detect and prevent threats in real time. So what is threat intelligence? While I was making these when I was making these slides on the airplane, I said to myself I would come up with a really good definition of what I thought threat intelligence meant. But since I'm neither very smart nor industry rock star, I decided to just do some lazy Googling. So this is what I found from Gartner. I'm going to read it out loud. Threat intelligence is evidence-based knowledge, including context, mechanisms, indicators, implications, and actionable advice about existing or emerging menace or hazard to assets that can be used to inform decisions regarding the subject's response to that menace or hazard.
You said it again, I fell asleep.
It's a complete abstract, but Gartner's probably going to come out with a quadrant in a couple of years. Once it's all becomes mainstream, you all know about it. So knowing that definition, who here uses threat intelligence in one form or another? Raise your hand, please. A lot of you are not raising your hands, and that's a very bad sign. You guys absolutely need to use threat intelligence in order to keep up. Yep. Good. I'm here to talk about that. All right. So this next slide is going to take a couple of seconds to load up, and we're going to start talking about the problems that we see within threat intelligence, and you'll see why this slide is actually taking forever. So give me 1 second while the slide spins up. And we're going to talk, it's largely the problems dealing with threat intelligence. And first, right now, there's just way too much threat intelligence. And just like the problem that we see with security event tracking, threat intelligence is just being proliferated everywhere. So with all of this data around, some themes start rising. 1, management. New sources are coming about all the time. And it's incredibly resource intensive to constantly collect intelligence, to schedule it, to aggregate all this information. Question?
You're missing some of the ISACs in there. there are, what, 13, 15?
This is certainly not a comprehensive view. There's too much. There's too much. Second problem with too much for intel is how do you come up with a schema for aggregation? Not all this intelligence being provided by all these people are the same. how can we come up with a model where we shove all this information in one place that makes meaningful sense? And the third is context. Who provided it? Why am I tracking this information? Why is it even important? You can't just simply collect it. You need to understand why it's bad. Another problem, metrics. Right now, there's an inability to accurately justify the purchase of a threat intelligence feed based on cost and prioritization perspective. Which product do you buy first? Which one is better? What does better even mean? Buyers have a daunting task of trying to figure out which vendor is providing value to their mission. Not only that, how do I know which feed is providing relevant intel to the industry that you're in? If you're in finance, which I suspect most of you probably are, does this defense-related information actually pertain to you? Is it providing value? And how do I know if an intelligence source is providing data that you can actually use? If you have some feed that costs $500,000, how does that compare against a feed that costs only $50,000? And the last problem we'll talk about, so now that we have all this threat intelligence stored in one place, that's great. But what the hell do we do with it? Does it just sit there, or do we just use it as a reference tool or just trying to look up information? All this stuff can be much more powerful if we get integrated into our daily operations. And this is where we dive into the integration and distribution of the threat intelligence platform. From now on, just call it TIP. So let's start with architecture. When we first designed this, we called it our battle rhythm workflow, kind of a military background. And this covers the architecture within a SOC, Security Operations Center. And this is how information flows within the various different SOC components that we typically see. And don't focus on vendors. We're neither promoting or implying any relationship. They're just there kind of as a placeholder to get you thinking. So we'll follow ooh, this is terrible, I'll cut off. We'll follow how information flows within this model, and we'll start top-down and follow the life cycle of an indicator compromise. So up top, we have the external feeds, and we've broken up 4 major categories. You have your government information, those are your joint indicator bulletins, all the private industry notifications. Your commercial feeds, those are your ISAC, or those are your CrowdStrikes, your iSites. Private communities, ISAC, I heard. FS, NH, and there's just so many, REN, retail. And then your open source intelligence. And we try to bring this information automatically into a threat intelligence platform. And the first step that you absolutely have to do is just 2 very basic steps. Indicator normalization and validation. Is this IP address well formed? Is this even a real IP address? Is this MD5 hash well formed? Did somebody fat finger it and add an extra character or just a symbol that doesn't belong in there? And how do you normalize all this information? Do you keep the port numbers at the end of your IP addresses? Do you keep the HTTP, the www in front of your URLs and domains? So once you do all the boring stuff, we try to gain context on it. And we look into your log repository. Typically, when people receive a piece of threat intelligence, they start looking for it from that point on forward. But nobody's ever looking backwards. And there's a lot of great context there. Has it already hit you? And that context is incredible. So for example, let's say you get an IP address. If it's hit 2 million times in the past 24 hours, why waste time on it? It's noise, don't even bother. However, if it's hit 3 o'clock in the morning 3 weeks ago and there's irregular patterns around it, could be a potential IR event to raise the associated flags. So the previous context, you look in your repository, has already hit you, incredibly important. From there, using that context, you start to rate and score this information. It pushes down your sensor grid. And this is your detection platform, your IDSs, and you see some ideas of where it goes through there. And then they push the information up to probably your SIEM or wherever else. You want your threat intelligence platform to interface with your SIEM. And typically, if you guys sat behind the SIEM, it's just all this event data. It's incredibly boring, just millions upon millions of just stuff. And it'd be nice if you could prioritize it. And context is important. Is this event associated with a country, China? Who provided this information? Did NSA or FBI give this to me? Is this something that we've seen previously in the past and it's already hit before, and you have to keep on looking for it? So prioritization can only be achieved through context. Your ticketing system. Has this intelligence been previously seen before? Has it been acted upon? How do you generate metrics around that? And the threat intelligence platform is going to interface with that. And the last is your sandbox. Do you guys have a malware sample that you've already seen before and analyzed? And here we index all the samples that you've already previously seen, bring that analysis, index all that information so that when you do have a breach, you can say, yes, I've seen this MD5 hash, I have the sample, I have analysis, it's all quickly accessible. You don't have to jump on some SharePoint server to try and track that information down. All right, so let's talk about the basic capabilities that a tip should do. And one of the very core capabilities of a tip is the management of indicators of compromise. And IOC, in this context, really atomic, domains, IP addresses, email addresses, hashes of all sorts. With all this actual intel, how do you manage the import and export of all this data? And you start dealing with some issues such as scheduling. Do you check every 5 minutes? You check once a day? How often are these sources refreshing their information? Logging. Did the last ingestion blow up? Did they go offline? They say they're going to give you all the intel, but if their server's offline, like why would you pay for that? Or you want to see, when did I get this information? You do post-mortem analysis. When did we receive this piece of information from the vendor? And the last is grooming. You can't just bring all this intelligence into your environment and just start blocking it. There's certain sources that are higher value and higher priority than others. If you're leveraging open source intelligence, you can't just put it all in block mode, because a lot of that is just incredible noise. Collaboration. If you have all this information here, you can add incredible value if you're allowing your analysts to collaborate on it. Has there been any work done on this piece of intelligence before? How are previous events resolved? And is there any other associated data that I should be focusing on? Event tracking. This is a fun one. So this is where we correlate your security events to your intelligence. By tracking security events, you can get better feel of your intelligence metrics. Is your intelligence actually catching any activity within your environment? What's the level of quality for this activity? For example, I said just open source intelligence. Is it just this general internet noise? It's just a waste of time, or are you catching full-blown incidents that lead to that could lead to a potential significant breach? And you can start to really generate really rich reports on your intelligence and its relevance to your organization by tying events to intel sources. Through tracking your events, you can also start to pivot into very adjacent areas like exploration. You don't want to be tracking IP addresses that you have for 5 years and nobody's ever going to use again. And you have to actually sunset them. You can't just keep on aggregating, because this is incredibly taxing upon your detection infrastructure, and it's eventually going to collapse everything that your security engineer is going to hate you. Been there, done that. Last is data enrichment. We need to continue to refresh our intelligence so that it doesn't go stagnant. Intelligence isn't static, it needs to be constantly enriched. And here, data enrichment in this context is identifying what else do other people know about this intelligence outside of our organization. And great resources you need to use here include VirusTotal, domain tools, ThreatGrid, raw text, threat recon. And we reach out to them on a regular basis and say, hey, do you guys have any details that we didn't know previously? So we just covered a relatively small set of features that threat intelligence platform should be capable of, but there's much more capabilities that we could dive into, but doesn't make for a great presentation. We don't have time for that. And I just want to put them up here for you to really start thinking about. All right, so now that we talked about this concept, let's see them in action. So this is a screenshot of version 1 of the ThreatQ, the threat intelligence platform, and we're going to talk about some of the things that we discussed. IOC management and context. So here, this is a domain, it's weather-online.hop2.org, and has an active status. And the reason why I chose this is because so many different vendors have seen it. So in this specific instance, we're only focusing on source. Who provides this information, who has seen it? And it provides a lot of cool information when you apply a context to it. So if you look in June of 2013, Fishtank first sees this and publishes it as part of the API. And almost 6 months later, Threat Expert sees it and releases it. And then CrowdStrike comes into play almost 8 months later. We're talking about almost 14 months between Fishtank and your first commercial vendor providing threat intelligence. Then, 2 months later, ThreatTrack picks it up as part of the Border Patrol report. Outside partners, almost 3 months. And then you see around this time frame, around the March 2014 time frame, when you see ISI, VeriSign, and then BAE releases it as part of the public white paper, and everyone starts knowing about this. SourceFire VRT picks it up, and then you see some additional context around it. Each site seems a little old. I'm not sure that's right. But really incredible context that you start to piece together here. So first, who provides this information? Is it always this vendor? What percentage of the time is this information coming in? Is there any vendor that you subscribe to that's not on this list? Because if there's not, it's really bad, because everyone is seeing it except for them. That could be a pretty bad sign. And what kind of details can you do these vendors push around? All right, so now let's start wrapping up this whole thing. So what? We talked about this threat intelligence platform thing and what it's supposed to do, but does this concept actually work? Has it actually accomplished anything useful, or is it just another snake oil product that you got paid money for? So this is also a screenshot for version 1 of our interface, and this is our event tracking piece, and this focuses around spearfish tracking, and this is the cool part of the presentation that you guys have stayed sober forward for this. So each dot represents a spearfish event. The size of the dot indicates the number of recipients. So you see the very large ones where they just shotgunned everyone. The color of the dot indicates a different group. These are all made-up names. Don't bother Googling them because nothing will come up. And the x-axis is day of the year, and the y-axis is hour of the day. So you start to notice some very interesting patterns. Particularly, you notice this band of activity that happens between about 9 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. Those are working hours on the East Coast, and it's fairly interesting. Okay, these blue bands, those represent the weekends, Saturday and Sunday. And you immediately see that none of these dots fall on the weekend. So now we know most of these spearfish are sent Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. Kind of cool, okay, not bored, whatever. How do we know these are Chinese campaigns? This is the really fun part. The red bands. The red bands indicates holidays in the People's Republic of China. And you see here, October 1st, that is their national day. It's equivalent of their Independence Day. And it's what seems to kick off this season of attack, all the way until Christmas. In fact, the weeks preceding Christmas, you see this huge flurry of activity, as if they're trying to meet some sort of end-of-the-year quota, or just trying to mask their activity with just all the end-of-the-year chaos. The week between Christmas and January 1st, the activity significantly dies down. Interesting, probably take some time off. The most interesting week is this last week here in late January, where there's zero activity. Does anybody know what Chinese holiday it is in late January?
Chinese New Year.
Chinese New Year, exactly. 3 years in a row, no activity. And you start to notice these patterns and trends about who your adversary is and how they operate. And if you were just to store this all in the database, you can't see this. So you really got to plot this out and really find new ways of displaying this information to get really your full value out of it. So I'll share a little bit about ThreatQ. We started in March of 2013, and our original vision was to simplify the integration of threat intelligence into our daily security operations. We created the TIP to be this universal connector between your sources and your consumers. And through connecting all the various different components within your SOC, our goal was to really streamline operations so that analysts aren't wasting their time on boring manual labor. And I'm a perpetual optimizer at heart, so automation is a huge part of my methodology in really solving problems. And our current customer base is really the Fortune 500, the Global 2000, pretty much any large enterprise that has a threat intelligence team or uses threat intelligence is a great candidate for us. Our current customer base include all the major brands, spanning across defense, finance, healthcare, and energy. At this point, really like to open up for questions. Feel free to ask me anything and everything. I come from a broad cyber background, so ask away. Yes, please.
Yeah, you have that chart with them when they do the attacks or whatever. Are U.S. specific holidays like really high, like July 4th, Labor Day, Memorial Day?
It all depends on how you filter that information. So that was a very specific view. Different operations and campaigns will have various different activities. So within our tracking, we'll overlay different holidays. Russian, Islamic, and we filtered that view to specifically be Chinese. I don't know, that's a good question. Certain campaigns may be targeting some sort of 4th of July sale, click this thing to win tickets to see fireworks or something. It could be. I don't have much knowledge in that area. Yes, please.
With this platform, you talked about your potential clients and them being large companies, so maybe a client that has like a firewall, a router, and a couple of VMs wouldn't necessarily have the operation where they could support this platform. But what kind of security infrastructure typically do potential clients of this product have in order to be able to support it properly?
Good question. So I like to think of ourselves more as a force multiplier. you don't have to hire a threat intelligence analyst to sit there copying this IP blacklist all day long. We just automate that entire process. It's a simple on and off switch. I want to use this thing. Just if we have a connector for it, just turn it on. If you don't, just write a connector so you streamline it in the future. So you can actually save a lot of analyst time just by leveraging a threat intelligence platform. So you don't actually need a huge team. And you saw our architecture. It's meant to be integrated with everything and connect information back and forth, so that when you have your source published in intelligence, you can automatically push it out to your firewall, to your IDS, on a completely streamlined basis. So, say for example, CrowdStrike releases something. The moment we check in on on a 15-minute interval, every 15 minutes, say, give me all your newest information, give me all of your newest stuff. When we get it, we process it, and then we push it out to your IDS based on a bunch of rules. So from publishing to detection time, we're talking a maximum of 30 minutes to an hour. And that's time that we save on analyst time. So you don't need these huge teams or these huge infrastructures in order to leverage a threat intelligence.
And those feeds that you're getting, are those feeds that your company subscribes to and part of your model? Like if I were to become a client of yours, we get those feeds through you, or are you getting those feeds from the customer having that relationship with FireEye and Snort and all those different areas? Where is that data being aggregated from? Is that happening on your end, or are you taking our feed?
Good question. So the question is on the aggregation of intelligence. How does it flow? Do we just simply download this intelligence and rebroadcast it out? Absolutely not. We don't see your intelligence. The way it's deployed is that this tip resides within your infrastructure, and it reaches out to these sources by itself. So it doesn't route through our cloud infrastructure or anything. So if you have access to an ISAC, we don't see that information. It just reaches out to the FS ISAC API and says, give me all your latest stuff. If you subscribe to some sort of secret squirrel feed, you don't need to know about it. You can create a connector for it to automatically ingest that information.
But you had lists like CrowdStrike, iDefense, your company has to have those products.
Correct. So it's whatever you subscribe to. We can broker the relationships to them, and we don't recommend one or the other. It's based on whatever you guys subscribe to. Any other questions? One more.
Yeah, I mean business, but you talked a lot about different sources that you have. Does the product actually do any containment? So like any kind of enforcement devices, are you able to take that actionable intelligence and either do something manually or automated response to that?
So the question was, do we do any containment or some sort of IR process? Is that correct?
Right.
So this is starting to move into the world of orchestration, and it's also a very nascent space coming out of security operations. We don't really facilitate any orchestration, but I suspect eventually we may go to that area. Let's say, for example, you see an MD5 hash and carbon black. Do we automatically shut off the machine, or segment it from the network, grab a memory dump, bring it back for analysis, and do all that stuff? Eventually, a threat intelligence platform may do those capabilities, but currently in this present state, we have not moved into the orchestration area at all.
Okay, thanks.
And
well, I mean, you mentioned the bringing back the MD5. Well, you get the MD5 hash, and then you say you get the memory dump. You're doing none of that today, right? You're just telling your clients, hey, this is a machine that's downloaded malware that matches an MD5 hash that we know about. Go do with it what you want to, right?
so we aggregate and we distribute intelligence. So we don't actually say that this MD5 hash is bad. It's whoever the intelligence sources are. We bring that information and we streamline and push it out to these various different devices and say, start looking for this MD5 hash. As to the fault responses, it's really up to the processes of the organization.
Gotcha.
Questions? Cool. Thank you guys very much.